This is the Culturosity podcast, brought to you by Geekality.com, your source for all things geek. I'm your host, JD Sage. Our guest today is writer and fellow podcast aficionado, Jamie S. Rich. Before we start the show today, we here at Geekality would like to send our thoughts and prayers to all those going through difficult times in the Philippines. May you be well and may life see you through this.
Alright, so welcome to Culturosity, where I talk to artists from around the world about the things that they do and that we all love. And how are you doing this fine afternoon?
I'm hanging in there. It's still morning here, so I'm still kind of getting my legs today.
Oh, I'm sorry. You could have told me that. I could have called you later on, make it more.
Oh, no, it's fine. No, it's like 10 in the morning here, so I'm only on my second cup of coffee.
Wow. Well, I have interviewed creators that like just doing this in the morning. They're in their underwear and they're just relaxing wherever. So I don't know if you're one of those guys, but, maybe this will suit you.
I'll do my best.
Okay. So, I like to keep things fast and loose in here. I like to just very basic questions and let the creators talk, because I've done interviews that have gone on for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and, the people seem to like that because they can hear you guys talk, and, they could care less about me. They just want to hear from you guys. So,
right.
Let's
I'm sure you're very interesting.
I wouldn't know about that. Let's get started with the basics. What was it that drew you to being a writer? What was that one thing that creator or that work of fiction that inspired you to want to write?
It's pretty hard to remember. I feel like I always wanted to be a writer. I guess I really started off wanting to be a cartoonist. My early ambitions, as far back as I can remember, even in elementary school, was to be some kind of combination of C.S. Lewis and Walt Disney. And so I would map out like these massive plans to where I was basically going to do a series of novels, and they were going to also then be animated movies, and I had all these like big offshoots, and never did any actual work. I just would sit there and make the plans. And I think it was just sort of like later on in my early teen years or junior high years where I finally kind of figured out, like, well, there's a big hurdle here in that you don't know how to draw, and you're not very good at drawing, but you like storytelling, so why don't you do that? And at the time, I was reading lots of different comics, because that was the mid-'80s, and so it was a perfect time for being in comics, because you had Matt Wagner doing Mage, and you had Frank Miller doing Dark Knight, and I was reading X-Men with Claremont and Romita Jr. and John Byrne's Fantastic Four, and basically I was reading everything I could get my hands on. Manga was just starting to get imported, and so I think a lot of that really crystallized for me, like, I want to do comics one day. Whereas for the prose, it was probably when I was 10th grade that I read my first Harlan Ellison short story collection, and that's when I really knew how I kind of wanted to try to write myself. So it was sort of just a culmination of this was the only thing I was ever meant to do as far as I can tell.
Well, don't give up on that Walt Disney dream just yet. You never know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Walt Disney was actually a great animator either. He really just you're kind of like the Frank Sinatra of an Ocean's 11 Brat Pack. He got the animators together and he pretty much coordinated things, but he was never really that much of an artist himself.
No, he I think, very rudimentary drawing skills. But, like, if you ever, like, there's a great extra on the Bambi DVD and Blu-ray where instead of an audio commentary, they sort of recreate a story meeting of Walt and his team discussing Bambi over time. And if you actually listen to that, he was incredible at figuring out how to do stories and picking things apart. And so as a sort of leader of the team, yeah, he was pretty impressive.
So there you go. Take your stick figures and your scripts and just, make your own Disney.
Exactly.
We could use a new Disney because Disney just has gotten so stale. We don't need another Pirates of the Caribbean 8, We need new stuff, so. The world.
Yeah, at one point we were even talking about my book, A Boy and a Girl, with Natalie Norgett, that's coming out in December, that we've sort of had our dreams of it being sort of animated in different fashions, but who knows what will happen there.
Yeah, a lot of creators don't, I've interviewed people who just get kind of offensive, I should say defensive about that whole approach that, for me personally, I agree with you. It's great as a writer and a fan to come up with something and think, wow, this could make a great movie or animated series that my nephew or niece would watch, or a video game that my cousin would love. And some of these creators just take offense, like, whoa, wait a minute. This is a comic book. It's meant just to be a comic book. I find it insulting that you want to turn it into anything else, but, I'm glad, you have that different approach. You like seeing it in other venues too. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, and it really depends. There's some stuff that I am definitely that precious about, to where I really can't envision how it would be translated, or I can envision how it would be translated, and I'm sort of horrified by where it would go. But with A Boy and a Girl in particular, I think like that story structure and the way we told it, it's set in the future, and it's a date night romance, and there's robots and all sorts of flying cars, and we kind of created the idea, our own near future, and it just seems like it would be one that would lend itself well to that medium. As most of the time, the book is of course always better anyway, but so I'm not necessarily worried about that. But I enjoy adaptations in movies myself, so at some point it seems like there's got to be some kind of crossover for me to have one of my projects maybe move over to a different medium. And I'd be curious to see, I would try to look at it as an extended collaboration. Like, I collaborated on a comic, now let's see what these people can do with it over there. But yeah, it just kind of depends.
So you got us started on that title. Let's go further into that. What was the initial inspiration for that? What made you want to tell that specific story?
Natalie Norgett came to me. She was pitching to Oni, and they were really interested in working with her. And she and I had done some short work together. We did a story called Julie Christie in a book that was Image released called This Is a Souvenir, which was adapting songs by this band Spearmint that was fairly obscure. Eric Stevenson was a huge fan of theirs, and he brought it all together. And we'd been kind of talking about, doing more work in the future, and Oni Press suggested to her that for her first go-around with a full graphic novel, maybe she should work with a writer. And so she came to me, and basically we just started spitballing ideas about what kind of stories she wanted to work on. I was already had kind of a reputation for telling relationship stories, and was looking for new ways to tell that kind of tale, for avenues, because after a while it's just like A Boy and a Girl, which is as simple as it gets, but what do we do with them? Where do we put them? What kind of people are they? And so we both actually had this intention of wanting to create a romantic story with two main characters who were very solid and very real, and not fall into that Garden State trap, to where the girl is saving the guy, or having he doesn't know what he wants to do, he's a slacker, or she's a manic pixie girl. We wanted to get rid of all that stuff. And so it just sort of we're trying to think about ways to make it interesting visually, and that's how we ended up on setting it in the future, so that we could create these cityscapes and different machines, and then add themes into the book about making personal choices, what it's like in an age where intelligence can be artificial and be created. How does that affect you? And it just kind of tumbled out. We really just I would come up with some ideas, I'd send it to her, and she'd veto them or say, yes, go with this, and it sort of just grew organically from there.
When collaborating with someone, do you go with full scripts or more of the Marvel method of just keeping it loose?
Mostly full scripts. but I try to keep it loose. I try to give them room to come up with different ways of doing it. I mean, my main rule that I always say is, like, as long as I don't have to rewrite my dialogue to fix something that you drew that doesn't make sense, I'll be happy with it. So it depends. The more I work with someone, the less detail I put in the script. So sometimes when we start a project, I'm writing pretty heavy and trying to get some ideas across. But particularly as also they grow more confident, they know how to remove what they don't think is necessary. And I tend not to come back with a hammer and pound on the desk and say, no, put that back. I think the only time I've actually now worked with Marvel Plot is Joelle Jones and I are co-writing a series that should hopefully be coming out next year, and based on an idea of hers, and that's kind of how we decided to structure the relationship so that she could be more involved in the process. Is that I'm been handing her Marvel plots, which is really, really strange to write. It's harder to think. I mean, I'm almost thinking in summary as opposed to working out the beats myself. So it's always an experiment with each new collaborator.
So talk about that new project you guys have coming out. Is that more aiming towards the same demographic as your previous collaboration, or are you know, is it?
It's kind of more in line with You Have Killed Me in that it's going to have some crime elements to it, and it's a period piece as well. We're kind of embargoed by Oni Press for telling people about it as of yet, but it's grounded in reality, but super stylized as well. It should be bloody and interesting, and I think should surprise people in a lot of ways. So, but yeah, it's hard to get into without giving up stuff that's going to get mad at me about for telling.
Okay, I won't hound you about that then.
Thanks.
Going back to Oni Press, you were like the head honcho there at one time, weren't you?
Yeah, I moved over there in 1998 and joined as an editor, and then early 99, Bob Schreck left for DC Comics, and so I took over as editor-in-chief, and I was co-owner with who's still the publisher, Joe Nosmak. So I actually was editor-in-chief from like 99 to 2004.
It's not often I get to talk to a former EIC. How grueling a work schedule do you have when you're an EIC of the company?
It's pretty grueling. Like, it was 9-10-hour days in the office. Actually, part of what slowed me down then, because I had left Dark Horse when I moved over to Oni, partially to pursue my writing as well and finish up my first novel. And that slowed down, particularly as I was using the same laptop at work and at home. So by the time I'd get home, I didn't want to open that thing up again. But it's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of keeping your eye on so many different balls and making sure none of them drop, and dealing with different personalities. And it was stressful. And I kind of, hit my fill of it. At the time, I used to joke, too, that, like, if you looked at the size of the company and the editor-in-chief was usually bigger proportionally. And I was a bigger dude when I was editing comics for Oni Press. I think I dropped 4 pant sizes within a year just quitting the job. I didn't actually change any other habits. So I was stress eating. It's a tough job.
It's safe to say you're not just creatively more satisfied, but physically better now, being a writer in the ISC.
Yes. No, I mean, I'm definitely creatively satisfied. I'm a much happier person. It was making me angry. I mean, it was nobody's fault but my own. It was more of I was doing something that wasn't really what was my intention or what I really wanted. And so I think my brain and my body was sending as many signals as it could to get me to move on and chase after what I wanted to chase after. And it's going to be 10 years now this next May that I'll have been freelance. So at this point I've been freelance almost as long as I was editing. So I'll be at a 20-year comic book anniversary in 2014. And I'm a lifer at this point, I guess.
most people seem to describe themselves that way. You know, you get hooked in the comics, you never want to leave, right?
Yeah, it's like you just can't get out.
Yeah.
It's an addiction.
You find that, I'm curious, do you find that your home life is a little bit better now that you have that stress gone from being in the IC?
Yeah, I mean, like, my cat seems to enjoy the fact that I'm home all the time. But I mean, yeah, I've been solo the whole time, so for me, it's like, it's only the cat and myself that I have to terrorize.
Let's go, I'd like to go over your first ever project as a writer. You know, I want to see how stressful that might have been, how nervous you were, or what lessons you would have learned from that first one to your latest project. I mean, as you said, you've been in the industry for almost 20 years, writing for almost 10. The experience from the first to the latest must be just dramatically different, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, my first full published work was 2000. I did a novel called Cut My Hair. And at the time, Scott Morse, I think he was still at Cartoon Network then. He's at Pixar now. But he was doing comics. He was doing Soul Wind with Oni, Ancient Joe with Dark Horse. And he basically had a little extra money, and he decided to create a press where his friends could publish books against different projects that maybe they couldn't put up somewhere else or were just kind of off the beaten path. And so I was one of 3 books that we did at Crazy Fish, and it was a novel that I'd been working on since college, kind of a punk rock coming of age, you know, your typical first novel type thing. But we decided to do it with illustrations, almost like a storybook, because I considered it to have a weird fairy tale quality to it. And so Scott Morse and Judd Winnick and China Collection Floors and Andy Watson all contributed illustrations to the book. Mike Allred and Laura Allred did the cover. Renee French drew design elements. And so I got all these comic book people to be involved, and we sold it at the time primarily to the comic book industry, to the direct market. And so that was a huge learning experience in general, because I had never published prose before, and that was its own special thing. At the time, actually, we had a hard time getting it to print right because the illustrations were throwing off the text, and so they were both getting fuzzy, like they weren't somehow, I never even understood at the time, it's like they just somehow weren't connecting. And I realized actually particularly what a good editor does, because I realized, oh, I'm in hell because my book is falling apart and it's not working and it's going to look bad. And normally this is what I protect other people from. I had no one in between going, hey, it's all going to be fine. It's going to be fixed. In fact, you're not even going to know there's a problem. So that was pretty hellacious. And it all worked out in the end, but there was a couple weeks there where I just wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out. And I think actually a lot of the differences maybe now is and I think this comes from editing too, is sometimes just not to sweat it. Don't sweat the small stuff. Take it easy. Don't fight over credit. Don't fight over, hunker over a specific idea when maybe there's a better solution. That seems to be now, like I'm doing this book from Monkey Brain called The Double Life of Miranda Turner with an artist named George Combadice, and he brought me the idea in July. We started riffing and collaborating, and we've got the book coming out now, October 30th, the first issue. It's only a few months later, and it's been one of the easiest things to bring together, partially because you just do it. Sometimes it's just sitting down and doing the work is really all it requires, and I think that's maybe more of where I'm at these days.
I'm talking to a lot of writers. If they don't go with the Marvel method, they tend to go with more of the full scripts, kind of like Alan Moore, basically structuring things almost like a screenplay. Do you tend to do that, or?
Yeah, I mean, the scripts can be fairly detailed. I tend to maybe describe more, though, about like the very basic action and then emotions and thoughts and meaning, as opposed to like every tiny little detail, because the artist is going to be better at visually imagining the page and going to be better at coming up with gestures and smaller actions that define what's really happening. So that tends to be where I let them run. But I do like thinking in terms of page structure, what panels I can fit on there, because if you're working in particularly like a comic book issue, which has to be 20, 22, 24 pages, whatever your length is, you do have to have some kind of idea of what works on a page, how many words can I fit, just spatially, how does this all come together, where do the pages turn? Like, there's a lot more to it than just coming up with the plot. So I like working in that format so that I can actually sort of have some control over how the information is released, because I feel like that's pretty important to the storytelling process of, like, when do I tell you what's happening? When does the reader get a certain piece of information that makes it all make sense? And that's where you can really bungle it sometimes. And in a comic book format, it really does come down to where those pages turn, where sometimes is it on a right or a left-hand page is important. And I think writers need to think about that as much as the artists do sometimes.
I'm really asked because that's actually great information. I'm sure the fans are going to love hearing that. I enjoyed it. But I asked because I know people have this issue in that transition from you're talking about camera angles and perspectives all of a sudden you're just working with text. And you're someone that
Right.
works in comic books and you write prose as well. Do you ever have that issue transitioning from one medium to the other?
No, I mean, I actually rarely call out camera angles or like panel size or anything like that. I do sometimes, and I do a lot of the times just saying I'll say maybe you can look over the shoulder, or maybe we see it from their point of view. But those are the things that, like, if that drops by the wayside, I don't mind if the artist goes a different way. Generally, the more detailed I get, it's really just because I see something pretty clearly. Like, I just turned in a script to Megan Levins for a horror comic that we're doing for Image Comics next year, and I had a page where I'm like, I'm really sorry. I'm really describing this in detail, but I have an interest, what I think is an interesting visual idea, that if she agrees, then great. She can use it. If not, Joelle Jones is actually the classic one that will come back and go, no, don't like this, I'm not doing it. Here's how it goes. And I'm totally cool with that. Sometimes she's let loose at the information at times where it was a little inconvenient. We actually did an interview together once where she was telling the interviewer that she had changed stuff, and I was like, wait, I didn't know that. So I was a little taken aback, but for me, particularly transitioning, like, if I want to go somewhere and be completely in control of the world, that's what I'm going to do prose. So in a way, comics allows me to loosen up and have a bit more freedom, actually, a little bit, just because I don't have to sweat over every detail, and I can have somebody do it with me. And they satisfy two completely different parts of my brain, but I need them both, and I think that it makes me a very creator at times.
Tell me about this horror comic book you have coming out from Image.
It's artist Megan Levins and I are creating it, and it's another period piece. It's going to be set in the 1930s, and it's going to be a kind of our riff on an old classic. But again, it was an idea she brought to me. I'm having a really good time these days with having artists come to me and say, hey, I have this idea that I want to do, and I don't quite know how to do it because I'm not the writer. Can you mold this? And so that's where we came from there. And we'd been working on a romance book for Oni Press that she was finishing up, and we just wanted to immediately roll into something else and do something completely different. And so for me, it's a real stretch, too, to change genre, try a genre I've never done before. And so, it's going to be set in the 30s. It has mad scientists and carnivals and monsters, and it should be interesting. And I think, and I can say this, is that Joel Jones is going to also contribute covers for us. So it's going to be all in the family.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear about the content of the story, because you know, nowadays you hear about the latest horror movie coming out. It's something to do with a haunted house or ghosts and comic books, it's zombies. So when somebody does something different, I absolutely love that. So thank you.
No problem, yeah.
Mad scientist, thank you. That sounds great.
Yeah, we referenced a lot of the old Universal Monsters movies in our pitch. That and My Fair Lady. Those are our two touch points. So,
nothing scarier than My Fair Lady. So, before, when we talked on the phone, we mentioned something. First off, that funky video that you have online for a series
From
of
the Gutter, yeah.
great interviews. Yeah. Tell me about it. How did you think of filming that?
That was actually our director's idea. The one where Ben Dewey walks by and I'm laying in the gutter reading comics.
Yeah.
So we did a couple of weird promo videos. There's one that is me sort of confessing my comic book sins over a glass of scotch, and then there's the ones laying in the gutter and talking to Ben Dewey. We basically just wanted to do a couple of teasers before the show came out that were kind of hopefully grab people's attention, be a little odd, because From the Gutters is a web series we're doing where I actually do something quite like what you're doing, is interview comic book creators. But in this case, I get to mostly go to their house and into their studio and sit and talk at length about their process and their life and look at them doing. Like right now we're editing the Michael Avon Oming episode that is about to go online. And I mean, we sit there and film over his shoulder while he inks and he explains his artistic process. So those guys, Martin Vavra is our cameraman and editor and sound guy, and Ryan McCluskey is the director and producer. They came to me and said, we have this idea we want to do an interview show because we're all in Portland. There's comic book people everywhere. You know them. You know the stories. Let's do a show where you sit and you talk with comic book people. And that started like early this year, and we shot 9 of them in the spring. We're editing and releasing them now at FromTheGutters.com. And just trying to find ways. So the early teaser videos, we're just trying to find ways to get people to notice us and say, we're going to be doing this. It's going to be fun. Look over here, that kind of thing. And I hated lying in that gutter. It stank so bad. It was so smelly.
Where were you? Where did you film that it stank so bad?
It's like right across my street. It's like right outside my apartment.
Yeah.
In like a really fancy neighborhood, so we're just like, I'm probably lying in dog pee and who knows what. Because the guy that started in Grimm, I think, lives in that building, so I like to blame him, but he's probably not fair.
You probably should have, it was an interesting video, but maybe you should have asked him to shoot it somewhere else instead of the gutter. I mean, I'm thinking of it right now, and I can't help but laugh and picture you as the most interesting man in the world, those beer commercials. I don't know where you create interviews, but when I do it in the gutter. Two pretty girls right next to you, that's so much better than lying in pee, right?
So I was reading a Superman Madman comic, so that was at least fun.
That was at least fun.
It was more accurate. It's a comic book, so it's more accurate for me to be lying in the street than it would be to be hanging out with beautiful women. But
well, then you can change it up. Have them in cosplay. One is
there you go.
There you go. So that sounds pretty cool, actually. Get to be in their house and interview them. Yeah, I tried that once, and I think J.M. DeMatti still has a restraining order on me. I gotta check.
One day I haven't been chased out or anything. I don't know if we didn't go to Ming Doyle's house. She visited us here, but I'm not sure she appreciated all of my sense of humor. But I don't think she quite went to the restraining order level yet.
Yeah. Well, we all have our foibles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something else we talked about yesterday. You have a novel that came out, and you have this really kind of innovative idea of just adding elements to the fiction online while the novel was out.
Well, actually, you're talking about Bobby Pins and Mary Janes.
Right.
I actually serialized the whole thing online on Tumblr. I haven't actually done anything with it yet to put it into print. I need to actually collect all that stuff and at least do an ebook, but prose is a lot of work to put together. But yeah, I serialized the whole thing online, and then in I forget if I did it weekly or twice a week, but in between chapters I would post different things like videos and illustrations, stuff that I had in my reference folder, just to kind of flesh out the whole process and play with that Tumblr idea and make it interactive. And the book itself was set in the comic book industry and has comic book scripts built into it. Because I basically it's a story about a young girl in her mid-20s that is an assistant editor at a comic book company, and what she goes through there, and she's having an affair with a cartoonist, and his comics are starting to, like, he's starting to use her as inspiration, and so that character that he's writing and drawing, that's the scripts you see. And so I wanted, like, the comics to reflect on what's happening in the main story as well. And so it was just kind of a fun, interesting experiment to do it all online, and as a way just to get it out there, because it had been kind of sitting in my desk for a while. And it's all still up there at bobbypinsandmaryjanes.com, and people can download PDFs and read it, or just read it online. And there's actually a fake comic book mentioned in the story called Integer City, which was supposed, in the story they describe it as a reprint of an old 1960s sci-fi private detective book. Because I like those movies from the period where they're basically like marrying old school style to what they imagine the future might be like. And that was the one. I'm actually now doing that property in Dark Horse Presents. Starting in Dark Horse Presents number 30, we're doing six chapters of it. Brent Schoonover is drawing it, and Jean-Pierre Bellew is coloring it, and it looks phenomenal. Like, those guys are really, like, making it come alive, and so it's this interesting project that keeps growing and adding facets to it.
Yeah, it sounds really, really cool, and a theme seems to be forming. You really like period, setting everything in a certain period, not contemporary, right? But
yeah, I mean, I've done a few things.
The past.
Well, I've done a few things that were contemporary. I mean, obviously, like the superhero stuff, like Get Girl and the Atomics, and the Double Life of Miranda Turner, and even
but even
Spellcheckers.
with that, you look at the covers for Get Girl and the Atomics, it's really like 60s pop art, isn't it?
Well, that's just Mike Allred. That's his style.
Yeah.
But in general, like those sort of are set in a non-specific time frame, I guess. 12 Reasons Why I Love Her was contemporary. But with Cut My Hair particularly, since I was writing about a music scene, I realized it actually helps to set your stories in a specific time. Because for punk rock, you would have to constantly update it by the time you get it out there. And then as soon as you publish it, it would be dated anyway. So it's like, well, why not make it set in a specific year so that I know all my references and all the pop culture stuff will be what it is. But I guess too, I just love old movies. I love the early part of the 20th century for American literature, like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Sherwood Anderson. And so I think I just get drawn to that because it tends to be what I consume the most of in my own entertainment. Film noir and old French films, like that kind of stuff is what I tend to gravitate to when I want to watch something or read something.
Well, it's always good for any industry to have unique voices, and certainly to have somebody that does things in different periods and different genres, and it lends a different voice in the medium full of too many contemporary superheroes. So, no, that's great. We thank you. We fans thank you for that.
Well, it really opened up what my own creative process as well. Like, I was heading down sort of a pigeonhole of just doing romance. When we finished up 12 Reasons Why I Love Her, it was Joelle who challenged me to write her a 1930s private detective story. And looking at, the Sam Spade novels and the Philip Marlowe books and doing that kind of thing. And I was really scared of it at first because I'd never done that before, but what I discovered is that within different genres, you find these ways to be yourself and that they actually challenge you in how you tell stories and you can mold the genre to fit your own style. And I found that actually liberating in that I could do anything. I could go anywhere in my mind. Why not? And if I can do this one, I can do horror next or do something in the future. And it just kind of, it's made me, I think, a better collaborator as far as working with my artists, and it's made me a better writer in general.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it's kind of like working with somebody that, there are illustrators out there that don't really draw cars well or things
right.
like that, or buildings. So, okay, you have to pretty much make a Tarzan book to work with them. But the guys, they can do everything. It makes it easy to work with them, right? So that's kind of the way you are. You can work in any genre with some confidence and peace of mind, so.
And, and I'm often challenging the artists to draw the things that they're maybe not going to be very good at. So it's good that they challenge me in return to, I know when I'm boy and a girl, Natalie Norgate had problems with cars, and I was like, well, not only have to draw a car, it's going to be off the ground. I'm flying in the air, so you see everything. So I don't think she's particularly happy with me for that. And then she tries to blame me for a church I made her draw, but she actually requested that we put the church in there, so that's her own fault.
So illustrators, you got to be careful with you then. Don't mention the weaknesses. You're going to be like, oh, you can't draw feet? Oh, here's a whole issue where everyone just wants to be barefoot.
Mike Norton
learn to draw feet.
Mike Norton hates rubble, chain link fences, and horses, so if I can hit that trifecta one day where I make him draw a horse standing in a bunch of rocks behind a fence, I'll win.
You're going to win. Just do like a Shaolin cowboy story, nothing but horses. Just to love that.
And there's rocks everywhere.
It's the worst nightmare. So,
but cars is a common one. People, they don't like having to draw those damn cars.
Yeah, right? That's so weird. And it shouldn't be, because there are reference photos for cars all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess people get too caught up in just drawing, the muscular bodies. They don't focus on the other things, but whatever. So, you're working all the time. You're a pretty successful guy, and you've been at this since pretty much right out of high school almost, right?
Pretty much straight out of college, yeah. I didn't finish college, so close enough to high school. So,
what advice can you give our young listeners out there that are maybe 16, 17 and looking to one day be where you are? How do they approach entering the industry, and how do they approach getting that confidence to do things like, as you said, you don't believe you can do at first?
Well, these days, I think in particular, there's so much access to being able to get your material out there. You don't have to go through the traditional channels anymore to get yourself noticed. I mean, with webcomics and blogs and all the access on the internet and downloadable comics, like you can actually do all this stuff without having to have a ton of money to pay a printer, getting through distribution channels, all of that. So I think in general, it's like just start working and get your stuff out there. Put your stuff on Tumblr if you're an artist, or write a blog if you're a writer, and start that way. Start interfacing with people online, and then start going to conventions and meeting people. Most of why I got into comics was back in the day, we would write to the letters columns. That was the closest interaction. There was no internet. And when I was in high school, I think maybe some people had like a Prodigy account. But it was all by mail. And then there was a few conventions you'd go to. And that's how I started meeting people. And And there's an element to too. It's like there's a social game in comics where if you can be cool, if you can hang out, and you're not gonna freak over people and be weird, you can be shy and be honest. But at the same time, it's like if you want these people to be your peers, you have to be able to be in a room with them and talk to them. And it really was just kind of all of that, of getting them to know my name through the letters, then meeting them at conventions. Diana Shepson offered me a job at Dark Horse. And I think it's still kind of the same. It's like if you're reviewing comics online and you're doing a good job of it, and editors at comic companies see that and you talk to them, you might end up working at a comic company. David Brothers is a great example. He was he's a really great writer. Was doing his own blog. He was writing for Comics Alliance, and now he's basically the editor at Image Comics. So I would say just do it. You can come with a million excuses not to share your work. You can come with a million excuses not to sit down and do the work, but nothing's gonna happen unless you make it happen.
Really, really sound advice. Thank you for that. I hope our young listeners are listening out there. And I hope we can.
Yeah, I mean, I was nobody from nowhere. I was in a non-creative family. I'm the weirdo of my family.
You are?
So they still don't understand what I do, but they let me do it. So if I can, I feel like anybody really can.
Well, yeah, that's good. I hope people are listening, and especially young girls, because we do need a lot more women creators in comic books just to get a different voice in there that women tend to have. And you've worked with creative women, so it's good to have as much diversity as possible in the industry. So
yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of ladies over time, and I mean, I was always attracted to stories. So for me, it didn't matter when I was an editor who you were, or what ethnicity you were, or what gender you were. If you had a good story and the ability to tell it, I was most fascinated by that, and frankly found at the time, and even now more so, like the women creating comics have the way more unique voice. I feel like men and boys, we tend to look at our older comics and we just a lot of guys just copy. They do their version of Batman or whatever. Whereas you get people like Vera Broskel and Jen Wang and Hope Larson, and they're just doing things that are completely different that we haven't really had in comics before, and telling their own personal stories and not trying to just recreate Superman or Spider-Man. And I think that in itself is extremely important to our industry. And the more points of view we have, the bigger our audience should be.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
Yeah. I grew up reading novels first and before comic books, so I understand the talent that women tend to have. I mean, look at the highest selling authors of all time for prose tend to be two women, one of which is Agatha Christie, isn't it?
Probably.
Yeah, and you look at all the billions that J.K. Rowling did, so women certainly know what they're doing. They're no less talented than we are.
J.K. Rowling at this point should be everybody's hero. Because all the things she's done since Harry Potter and the way she wrote her recent novel under a pseudonym and just sort of doesn't seem to care whether she plays the normal games or not. And I don't know, I find her really fascinating and a really interesting person to look at it from a creative standpoint and doing it the way you want to do it and fighting against preconceptions.
Yeah, any way we can get new voices out into entertainment, it's a great thing. It's a great thing. Because all these franchises that have sequels coming out have to start with that first one, right?
Right.
So that's great. Mr. Rich, thank you so much for your time. This was great, and hopefully we'll have it up on Geekality.com real soon, and on YouTube and SageTube channel and the Geekality channel. And keep working as hard as you are, so we can do this again and talk about a whole bunch of.
I definitely will. Yeah, definitely will. So, send me the links when they're all good to go if you can, and I'll spread them around.
Yeah, no problem. I'd appreciate that. And before we go, just give a shout out to the fans, anywhere they can reach you: Facebook, Twitter, a blog, what have you.
Yeah, my main website is confessions123, numerals 1, 2, and 3.com, confessions123.com. And there they can read my blog, get links to all the different books I'm doing, buy stuff for me. I still sign books. I try to put everything through there, but I'm also on Twitter as Jamie S. Rich, JamieEsRich, but you can probably just search Jamie Rich and I should pop up. I'm on Facebook under my own name, FromTheGutters.com. Like, I should be pretty easy to find and track me down. I'm on just about every site. And then, yeah, I'm going to keep out there slogging. I've got Spell Checkers. Volume 3 is coming out right now. Double Life of Miranda Turner is going to be on Comixology. Boy and a Girl next month. I'm staying busy.
Yeah, that's good. And don't give up on that dream to be the next Disney. You never know.
I won't.
20, 30 years from now, you might make it, and they'll have a bronze statue of you lying in that gutter in that video.
Yes, in my frozen head somewhere.
Oh, the frozen head. That's just creepy. That's just creepy. You'll be
I got a couple of them in my freezer already.
You'll continue to write as a severed head, like in Futurama. That's awesome.
Yes.
So thank you for your time, and I hope everyone watching this on YouTube enjoyed it, and subscribe and like. And make sure to follow Rich and buy everything that he writes, because we do need more people like him that just tell more than the average, shoot 'em up or beat 'em up. So give the man a try.
Thank you.
No problem. You take care, man.
All right, have a good day.